Hello, this is Nick Marki. This is now the Nick Marki podcast. I've decided to do a little rebrand from the Beach Barbell podcast, which is my physical therapy clinic and gym here in Wilmington. I wanted to expand generally what I want to talk about, since it's more or less going to be my morning drive / rant for approximately 24 minutes. That's how long it takes me to drive from my house right now to my clinic. Nice and early in the morning, so there's no traffic. Anyways, so again, welcome to the Nick Marki Show. Still most likely going to talk about health and pain and rehab type stuff, but I will also dump into other random topics. Maybe eventually even talk a little political stuff. And disclaimer, I am a libertarian. Lots of people think differently or define that differently, but basically all that means is I believe more or less in live and let live. Don't hurt people and don't take their stuff. Yeah, I won't get too much into that today, but maybe on another day I'll dive into that a little bit more detail. Anyways, so it's Tuesday. No, I missed yesterday. It's Tuesday, the 18th of 2020, February. February's almost done. And this is your semi-weekly, like I said, rant as I drive to work. But I'll get on with it. I'm stalling. Anyways, so met with a doctor the other day or last week, and I asked him, what among other things, but I asked him specifically, what kind of things don't you like or had a bad experience with physical therapy? And he said, when the patients come in and there's a bunch of them, and like a bunch at a time, and then they're all just laying on hot packs. So I kind of laughed because that is an annoyance of mine too, and definitely not what I see as physical therapy. It's kind of interesting, though, to think about what the heck even physical therapy is, right? It's simple to understand when you're thinking of maybe it and being in a hospital, or maybe like a rehab setting where someone, has got discharged from the hospital and isn't quite ready to go home yet for whatever reason. And so rehab will work with them on, learning how to, move around and use their body in whatever condition it is in now. Maybe if it's like somebody had a spinal cord injury, they're used to walking and normally doing stuff like that, but now they have to learn how to use a wheelchair and navigate up and down curbs and all that kind of stuff. So the rehab team, usually that's called acute rehab. So then it's short term, you're there for weeks, months kind of thing, and then going home. So that's pretty straightforward. You can see where that is, physical therapy and learning to, move around and function, with my new life. When it gets to outpatient, it's kind of interesting because there's kind of a gray area of when it becomes physical therapy, and it's interesting just what different people think of as physical therapy or the word treatment. So like, let's say maybe a straightforward case, someone gets a total knee. So that's where someone probably had, arthritis and severe enough knee pain that they decided to go in for a surgery where they remove the ends of the bone and replace it with some sort of artificial, ceramic or titanium type material, so that they no longer, or the joint arthritis is no longer an issue because now it's an artificial material. So, they cap off the ends of the bone, put on that artificial material, and then zip the person up. Generally they're going to get referred to outpatient physical therapy. Usually what will happen is they'll be in the hospital for a day or two, then they'll go home. Oftentimes there's what's called home health, both nursing and therapy, and then after maybe a couple of weeks of that, they'll go to outpatient therapy, physical therapy, where work on things like getting the range of motion back of the knee, trying to get it to straighten better, get it to bend better, get the strength in it better, work on things like going up and down steps. Basically similar situation as the spinal cord injury patient in the acute setting, but in this instance the person with the surgery goes to a place and goes there for generally half an hour to an hour and works on all those things, maybe rides a bike, whatever. Pretty straightforward, but what's interesting is in my experience, which I know are the 3 worst words you can say from a science-based practitioner, but in my experience, watching what my colleagues did with people never made a whole lot of sense. And generally what I would see would be, so I'm just talking about these total knees for now. So a total knee patient comes in, maybe they get on the bike for a few minutes, 3 to 5 minutes or whatever. Okay, that's fine. Then the therapist would proceed to kind of stretch their leg and generally would do things that are called a joint mobilization. And that's kind of like where they're going to push near the joint, the knee joint, up or down, sometimes kind of wiggling it up and down, with the idea that they're improving this, it's called accessory motion of the knee. So it's kind of sliding back and forth. Okay? And the idea behind that is that if you improve that, then the knee will be able to bend or straighten better. And if you look on the face of, I want to say almost all of the people with the total knee, it is not pleasant. They are in a lot of pain, and usually they're not super excited to go to physical therapy. And then oftentimes therapy gets this moniker of physical torturers. Okay? I never understood. I used to do things like that. I generally wouldn't go to the point where someone was having a lot of pain personally, because that just doesn't make any sense to me. And so I used to do a lot of those joint mobilizations, but I never understood later on. I keep saying never understood. I understand why they're doing it, but it actually just doesn't make any sense. And here's why. So when the surgeon is in there, all right, they open up the person's knee, cut open the skin, okay, maybe move the kneecap aside, okay, unless they're going to replace that too. And then they chop off the ends of the bones near the knee joint, so the bone parts that make up the knee joint. That is not like, they use a saw. So it's like pretty serious equipment, okay? And then when they're putting on those new artificial ends of the bones to make the new knee joint, the artificial knee joint, you know, they're like banging on this thing. And I mean, you could YouTube and find a total knee surgery, I'm sure. And so it's pretty serious carpentry. Like it's hard work. Bones are freaking strong generally, okay? So they do all that, and then while the person's still open, they're going to move that knee through its full range of motion. They're going to fully bend it, and then they're going to fully straighten it past even just full straight. They're going to go to what's called hyperextension. It's where the knee goes kind of, where you're straightening your leg all the way, but the knee actually like kind of goes backward in a way. Some people, it looks really freaky because they have a lot of hyperextension. It's kind of where you like lock out your knees all the way back, okay? And they compare that side by side with the, you know, non-operative knee while the person's on anesthesia. So the person's out. There are some people that have gotten just epidurals, and then they just put a screen or a sheet, but sometimes they'll even have a video so the person could watch the video of them getting their knees replaced, which I think is pretty cool. Anyways, so the knee moves through its full range of motion while they're still open. They, you know, if that range of motion's good, they know that the joint that they've created is working smoothly. So then they zip them up, sew up the knee cut that they, opened up to get in there, okay? And then they do the same thing. They move it through again to check to make sure it's got the range of motion. So they have full range of motion, day 0, 20 minutes into the surgery, okay? And then they turn the person back online, take them off anesthesia, and gradually the knee starts to stiffen up again, okay? So there's no magical, instant scar tissue that's, immediately making the knee, freeze. No, that's really silly. Scar tissue takes a little while to be created, okay? But you have this thing called a brain and a nervous system and spinal cord and all that's hooked into the muscles that controls the muscles, okay? It also has sensors in all the areas too. So what it's sensing is holy crap, something just insane just happened, what the hell just happened? I just got hit by a truck or whatever, okay? And so it wants to protect the crap out of that knee. And that is why most likely it's so stiff, so when the person's offline, when that system can't defend the knee, it moves through that full range of motion. The doctor has to check that, make sure, because if it doesn't move through the full range of motion when you're offline, you're never getting that full range of motion back when you're online, okay? So now and it depends person to person. So the patient that got the total knee, generally is going to have quite a bit of pain, but it can depend. I've had people where they really didn't have a whole lot of pain. It's it's kind of sore. You're like, oh, okay. That's obviously, it's kind of maybe a little luck of the draw, potentially. And so now the person's back online. It's stiffer because the body wants to protect it. And over time, where the rehab, whether that's the person doing stuff on their own or working with a physical therapist or whatever, is basically reteaching the body, what's going on in a gradual manner, okay? So teaching it that it doesn't have to protect the knee as much as it does. And part of that's just going to be time, okay? Some of that will just be time. I mean, there's total knee patients that don't end up going to outpatient physical therapy, and they just go back to walking and doing everything in their normal life, and often then a lot of them are probably fine, okay? But there are a lot that do end up in therapy and then do end up with this what I see, and it's like this hardcore stretching that looks super painful. And there's quite a few reasons why this is very silly, and I don't know, just I think just a waste of the person's time and just needless suffering. Okay, so if say that you're stretching the crap out of this person's knee and they're in a lot of pain, you know, and the logic behind it is it's like, oh, there's scar tissue and you're so tight and da-da-da-da-da, and it's like, well, they're tight because their body is freaked out that it had this insane thing happen to it and it's not sure what to do. You know, it's scared and it wants to protect their knee. Okay, so having them now go through even more pain, like by you cranking on it, okay, so this outside force, this weird person that's like now like really cranking on your knee, might make the body want to protect more. Okay, like the body goes, wait a second, who the hell is this person cranking on me? You know, I'm going to really defend myself here, you know. And then you add in the fact that, you know, this whole physical torture moniker, and the patients, a lot of these total knee patients really, for lack of a better word, just getting relatively afraid of physical therapy. I think you just have like a recipe for sort of disaster, because you know, the body's just is going to add up all these variables to be like, this is not a great place to go. And so the tactic I've taken instead is basically just to help them work out. Okay, and I mean, there's three, or it used to be, we had, you know, machines where I would just, you know, generally I would test their knee extension strength, so that's where you straighten the leg, and then their knee flexion strength, which is where you bend the leg. Okay, bending and straightening the knee via some sort of handheld dynamometer, and that's just fancy talk for a force measurer. So like they'd push on it and it'd tell you how much pounds of force they were pushing into it. Okay, and then compare that side by side, and so you just kind of get a good idea of what they're working with now. And a lot of that weakness, I mean, part of that could just be weakness because it's very likely that they maybe were favoring that leg prior to surgery, potentially, and also just the body kind of limiting itself from pushing as hard because it's in pain. Okay, and also now that they're like, you know, have this big old cut on the front of their leg, you know, this big old scar that still probably is a little sore or raw. So little factors in there. But anyways, that gives you a good idea of what to start with in terms of like load and weight. Okay, and then we just go on the knee extension machine, the leg extension machine, and then the leg curl machine, and then, you know, some sort of leg press, or if they're able to, trying to do some sort of like box squat, or maybe like a split stance box squat. That's where like one foot goes in front of the other, so you can kind of almost force putting weight on that leg and also force it to bend more when it's in the back too. So different stuff like that, basically using gravity to our advantage, and then practice things like, you know, step ups and stuff like that. And I'll tell you what, you know, granted those things weren't necessarily easy, but the person was always in control. They weren't getting cranked on by some outside force, you know, causing a lot of pain. I mean, generally, out of all of it, the hardest thing was usually just riding the bike, you know, and, you know, just trying to get the revolutions on a bike. So, you know, usually I'd raise up the bike seat as high as they can sit, to, you know, give them some room, and then try to get them to go in circles as much as they could and tolerate, you know, and that's usually just a few minutes or so, and that's fine. And I don't, you know, for the last, I don't know, almost 6+ years, I guess, more or less, I've just stopped doing those joint mobs because it just didn't make any sense. I mean, they spend like 5, 10, 15 minutes, and usually you'd have half an hour with somebody. Like, I was way better off just finding ways to use gravity to help us get range of motion, because gravity is always there. It can push way harder than I can, and also the person was in control. Okay, so, and the logic behind someone coming to somebody maybe 2-3 times a week and getting their legs stretched for a few minutes, 5 to 10 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever, thinking that that's going to make a huge difference in the long run things, that's not even enough. Like, anyways, just enough dosage time doing it, okay? Versus having them do some sort of loading exercise that's going to make a change more long term, plus, teaching them ways to do, use gravity to, quote unquote, stretch the knee. And remember, we're not really like stretching muscles per se. We're more just kind of teaching the body to be okay with giving that range of motion back, and so going little by little, gradually over time, is probably going to be more successful, because the way I think of it is like it's a give an inch, take a mile type mentality. So you kind of go right to the edge, and the body's like getting a little bit, hey, you're getting a little close here, and then you're like, okay, and then you back off, and then you go again, and you back off, and you go again, and over time that line, just via time plus you gradually pushing the envelope, little by little, pushing your boundaries, gradually the body's going to give that range of motion back. Okay, and plenty of my total knees where I never cranked on their knee, and basically we just did strengthening exercises and walking and maybe some balance and step ups and yada yada yada, they got the range back just fine. Okay, without having to crank on it, and they never called me a physical torturer or anything stupid like that. So yeah, so there's my rant. So still kept it rehab and pain focused today. So I'll get back on the horn semi-weekly whenever I just get the urge to do it. And hope you have a great Tuesday. And I'll talk to you next time. Thank you. This is Marki again. Bye.